Hey everybody, welcome to the Office 365 Pulse. It's good to have you guys here. We've got a big group of updates for you guys. I know we've missed a couple of weeks. It's been summer, so it's hard to pull everybody together and get everybody's schedules. But Tom, Adam, and I are all three here today to talk to you guys about some updates. So we'll start and go through the list. Just as a quick reminder, we'll go through. So in development means that they're working on it. That means they're in, the sausage factory, making the sausage, pulling all the pieces together. Rolling out means it has started to roll out to people in targeted release or first release. So you may or may not see it in your environment. It just kind of depends on where it's in the rollout cycle. Launched means you should see it in your environment depending on where it's launched to. So keep in mind if you're in GCC or one of those other environments, it will depend on where it's launching to. But it launched means it should be there and should be available. Canceled means it's no longer in the works, but you always have to remember that canceled could mean that this feature is canceled because it's rolled into another feature, and we actually do have an example of that today where a specific feature is canceled and you might look at it and go, oh man, that really stinks. But it's okay because the feature itself isn't canceled. It's just on the list with a different ID number and still rolling out. So those are kind of our different statuses that we have here. And so we're going to just take some time, go through the list, and I'm going to toss it over to Tom first to get us started with some of our ones that are in development.
Sounds good. So the first one I saw that interests me, being the developer SharePointy person, is the enhanced list editing in Grid View.
Woohoo! Year of the list too.
Yeah, they've got a lot of things on the burner for improving quick edit. And that, I think, is just wonderful. Like conditional formatting is going to be coming to where it retains that, column widths and the whole bit. In this particular one, it's allowing for cut and paste of data from other sources. So again, the easier that Microsoft makes that to get data into a grid sheet view or a quick edit view, awesome. Love it a lot.
Yeah, awesome.
So here's a bunch of Intune stuff that I bet Adam would love to talk about.
Yeah, so I'm going to combine about 8 updates into one thing that we can kind of talk about. One of the things that's kind of cool to see, especially out there if you are a corporation or an agency that uses a lot of Apple products, specifically talk about like iOS, iPads, things like that. They actually released a ton of iOS enhancements for Intune. iOS was already pretty good with Intune. They had a lot of features and cool things that you could do, but they're really kind of taking a step forward and making it more enterprise grade. Just to list off a couple of the highlights, they're doing enhanced features during enrollment, so stuff like custom notifications from your company out to your users, configurable private messages during enrollment, deeper settings of control itself. But some of the ones that I thought was probably the coolest, for the longest time on Windows, you could do like BitLocker encryption natively with Windows 10, but you didn't necessarily have that same control of Apple devices, but actually allowing integration and control with FileVault, which is kind of the Mac OS equivalent of BitLocker encryption. They're actually doing integration with the volume purchasing program. They've always had integration with DEP, which is device enrollment program, without getting too technical in there. But for companies, if you're buying a whole bunch of iPads, a whole bunch of iPhones, they're having basically direct integration from Apple's volume purchasing program, where you're not having to go and enroll each device, which is freaking awesome. They're also doing stuff like, and this was always one that I found annoying. So say we're in a hypothetical situation where Tom is my admin and he's managing my iPhone, but I've
that's hypothetical.
but I've already installed the Outlook app. If that was the case and then I enrolled in Intune with, Tom helping me, I would have to delete the Outlook app and reinstall it because I've now been enrolled in Intune. So actually allowing companies to take over pre-installed applications, assuming it fits the same mold. And that's just quality of life stuff that honestly should have probably existed for a while. So really cool to see this whole litany of updates coming out around the iOS and Intune. Really, really nice to see.
Cool.
That's really cool. So one Okay, one that I saw that I think is really interesting that they have in development is around SharePoint site usage. And so this one I think is really cool about devices and the platforms that are hitting your environment. So pretty soon on the site usage reports, you're going to be able to see, hey, is it iPads, is it computers, what is hitting my device? And it's going to show me over 70, 30, and 90 days just what devices are coming. That's going to help me optimize how I'm designing my site. That's going to help me make good decisions in design. And so I think that's really interesting to see what's coming along with some of the other usage reports that they're giving us. So I'm excited to start to see that in development, see where they go with that. The more data they can give us, the better sites we can make. The better sites we can make, the more people will use them. The more people use them, the more data they have. You know, it's this great cycle that leads us to good things. So I'm excited about that change and seeing them give us some practical data there.
Very cool. I wanted to touch on the fact that they have the entry for My Analytics add-in coming to more Microsoft 365 and Office 365 suites. I know we've talked about this a number of times, and I still had a little confusion over what exactly does My Analytics mean, because we do have the whole analytics add-on that you can do in Outlook right now, but the kind of stuff that we've been wanting to provide people, and they've been wanting us to provide it to them, is the ability to go in and say, okay, how many emails did I get? How long did it take to respond? All those kind of things that are the interesting elements of what do I do, how do I do it, how can I shift things around. And there's another one later on that also talks about the My Analytics having a weekly email summary that gets mailed out. And I think that's really awesome, because sometimes you just forget to go out and check or stuff like that. To have that coming to you on a weekly basis to where you can say, wow, last week really sucked, and here's why. Now you can have that come right to you. And so I'm looking forward to those two. And I really hope that the kind of information that I think they're going to be sending out is truly going to be that detailed and get down to like E3 in our case.
Really good. Well, I have one more in this section, but before I go, Adam, do you have anything else in this section?
You're on mute, Adam.
Good call. There are two things that kind of hopped out to me. One that I thought was really cool, they're doing some stuff around Microsoft Teams. As our organization, we're in the process of fully developing into Teams, and we're kind of somewhat, siloed in a good way where we have different divisions, and some divisions are using it and some aren't. But going through it, one of the things they're working on is stuff like real-time presence in Teams. They're also working to enhance the one-on-one chat specifically with external users. And honestly, that's one of the few complaints I had about Teams, that I felt like when I was working with someone from an external organization, Skype was still a better experience for me than trying to go through Teams. So seeing them go through and developing some of the stuff like that I thought was really, really cool. And then one more admin-y thing that I thought was really neat. Advanced Threat Protection is one of my favorite newer features of Office 365. I think that's the enterprise quality security controls that really put Exchange Online Protection up there with, Proofpoint and Ironport and some of the more enterprise class stuff that you're seeing. Well, one of the things that was always kind of wonky, it works, but it was wonky from an end user experience. How Advanced Threat Protection works, one of the things it does is safe links, where you'd click on a link and then it would scan to make sure it was good. But it wasn't proactive, so as soon as a new email came in, if you were a user and you went and clicked on the link and Microsoft wasn't sure if it was good, it basically opened up a tab and be like, hey, we're checking it out for you, give us a second. But end users didn't always really understand that. They're like, why am I getting a message? Like, why isn't it taking me where it's supposed to go? Well, basically, Microsoft realizes it's probably not the best end user experience, so they're going to start automatically scanning. It's basically going to use some, built-in analytics and built-in intelligence to start scanning those links as soon as the email comes in, so it actually doesn't require the end-user interaction of clicking on it. That way, hopefully, 5 minutes later, when your end user goes through and clicks on the link, it's already have been scanned and detected by Microsoft, so it's a more seamless experience. So cool to see improvements like that.
Awesome. And the last one I saw, which I think is actually really neat because it goes into the artificial intelligence. And this is where we're starting to see the machine learning and stuff like that going on in our SharePoint environments. And they're working on a way where on SharePoint news pages and pages that we can have, I don't know if it's going to be a web part or something that's there that shows us related pages and news articles within our environment that are related to the page based on who we are, what's on the page, what we're doing, doing and different things like that. And so I think that's a great example of how that, if you remember a couple of years ago, Microsoft would show in their demos that big thing, and it would be people all over the world, and then you have the little spikes, and we're all interconnected in this world through data. And, this is like an example of that, right? Like data that we're all connected through together and bringing it all together. And so I'm excited to see what they're going to start doing with some of that information and the things that they're doing there. I think that's a super interesting space that we should really be watching over the next couple of years to see what's coming there. So I'm excited to start seeing some of that trickle down into Office 365. So that was the last one I had in that section. So we're going to move to the rolling out section, and since I'm talking, I'm going to pick on Tom again too. So Tom, take us away and tell us your most exciting things about rolling out. That just means you get to pick from the list first.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump down a little bit. I'm going to skip all the Outlook for Android, iOS stuff that's out there. I'm going to go to the one for SharePoint, lists from lists, and lists from Excel. The thing that I like most, I know we've talked about this briefly before, the fact that you can now start creating SharePoint lists or new SharePoint lists based on an Excel spreadsheet. And you can sit there and say, well, yeah, you could do that in SharePoint 2010 too, but it was kind of like, best guess as to what the field types are. We're going to throw them out there, and poof, there you go. Then you'd have to go clean up the list.
It only worked in demos with perfect data, and since no one in the real world has perfect data, it never really works.
Exactly. Yeah. So here what it does is once it says, okay, I'm going to go pick the fields out, it actually shows you almost like in a quick edit mode of what all the columns are going to be. You can adjust the types. You can set, some of the details for that type. And you can also remove columns that you're not going to want in your list. And then when you're done and you click Enter, then it goes ahead and loads the spreadsheet based on everything you just did. That is huge. In fact, we just, in our migration, somebody was talking about they had a task list and it really didn't work well for him and it wasn't allowing him to do things. And he really wanted it to be a custom list. I said, well, if you can really export this out, then you can create your custom list based on that Excel spreadsheet. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'll let you know when that's out there. So this is going to be really big for us, I think.
Yeah, and while we're at it, there's a couple of other things for lists, so I'll just kind of mention those as well. So we're getting some more visual cues on the status of a file. So think check-in, check-out, DLP signals, missing metadata, stuff like that. There used to be, they call them the eyelash, the little they call that the eyelash. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So when things are, there's an activity we need to take on a file, that's going to start to be more visible. Also, column totals are going to show up in the modern view. These are some of the things that were driving people back to Classic because it existed in Classic but didn't really exist in that modern view. So some of these small, what I would call delighters, they're probably not the make it or break it, but they're definitely going to be little delighters that are going to make you happy. And then, of course, the sticky column headers, those are back into that rolling out stage. If you notice, those came into a rolling out stage a while ago, and then they have stayed in that rolling out stage. I think it's been a pretty slow rolling out of those. I think if I had to guess, usually when we see something rolling out like that and it rolls out that slow, it means that there's been, they probably found something when they were rolling it out, went back, made some changes and some different things there. So that's continuing to be in that rolling out stage. But that simply means the sticky headers is if you have a super long list, as you're scrolling through the super long list, you get sticky headers that stay at the top to, again, make it more super usable. So
you know what your columns are.
Yeah, so you know what's going on there. So those are some of the other things coming with List. So I think those are all things that are rolling out now. So again, based on where you're at in that rollout cycle, you should start to see those things pretty soon. So Adam, we'll let you kind of talk now. I'm sure there's some other things in that rolling out phase. We'll let you go ahead and chat through that.
Yeah, so I have two things. One of them's real easy and real simple. The other one I'd actually love to get y'all's impressions of too, because I see it as a good thing, but also potentially problematic. So the easy one, they announced that they're going to be coming out with a new role list that you can view as far as being an admin. So right now, if you're managing and giving out permissions for someone to be an admin in your organization, you go to the Users tab, select the user, and give them the permissions that you want. Why that works great on an individual user-by-user basis basis, there's nowhere to really go and say, these are all of my admins. These are all of the people that have global admin. These are all the people that have Exchange admin. It's literally you going through your entire list of users in your organization and looking one at a time to see what they have. So we're basically going to be adding an additional view that you have. So just like users, there'll be a roles section, and there you can view list of people that have specific roles. It's going to become easier to manage who has permissions to what inside of your organization across Microsoft 365. So again, just kind of quality of life thing. Like, I've dealt with this for 3 years, and I've never really thought of it as a problem, but I read an update like this, I'm like, oh yeah, that's really clever, because there's really not a great way to do that right now, other than going through PowerShell and getting into scripting and stuff like that. The other one that I'd love to get y'all's opinion on, so I see this as a good one, and I'm sure you guys probably saw this update. They had it classified under the business-to-business sync. And it's basically the idea that the only thing they call out is OneDrive, but I'd imagine with OneDrive you could potentially extend this out to SharePoint. They're basically allowing people to go through and share out OneDrive folders to sync down to other organizations. So if you're set up in a business-to-business relationship with another group, you'll have the ability to go through and sync down folders that you have permissions to your desktop. High level, I think that's cool. I could definitely see a case where you're working with a partner organization and you have something like that that's important. It also terrifies me as an admin because one of the most common things that you see is someone syncing down like a OneDrive folder or a SharePoint list and not realizing that anything that they do there is then permanent, and deleting stuff they shouldn't delete or making changes they shouldn't do or putting extra stuff in there. And the idea of extending that out to people that I'm not responsible for their training, I'm not responsible for their education, I'm not responsible for whatever they're doing, worries me a little bit. I can see the scenario where one of my users would give permission to Bob that they're working with from company A, and who knows what Bob then does with my data. So that gives me a little bit of a pause, even though I think the feature is cool.
I'm kind of with you. I like the feature at a high level. Have you seen the admin support on it yet and what you can control?
I have not, because it's one of those things. I should actually check my tenant, because since we are in the rolling out section, there's a chance that I have this in my lab.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in my tenant yet, but it'd be interesting to see what level of control they gave you, because maybe it's something you can pick and choose what trusted tenants you give it with. Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree with you. With much power comes much responsibility.
Like it's a cool
Superman,
feature,
right?
Yeah. It's a cool feature, but the admin in me just sees so much potential mess ups from this,
Yeah, I don't think this is a feature that I would want to turn on and make available to everybody. Much like in our organization, if you're going to share external, there's a number of steps you have to go through to get approval to do that. And I can see in some instances where this would be really good. But I wouldn't want Bob to say, hey, Joe next door to such and such, I'm going to share party stuff with him. And then you've got this, pipeline that other non-party things can go through. So great, much like both of you, great idea in theory, probably a very select use case that you'd want to use it for.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Well, let's move down to launch. So this means it has been put out in the wild. So if you are on the tenants, you should be seeing it there. So, Tom, since you have started us out in every section, I'm going to just have you start us out and launched again. Talk to us about where you're at in launched and some of the things that excite you about launched.
So I could be really mean and talk about the organizational news items on there, but I would probably be forever in your bad side.
No, you're never in my bad side. I let you go first, which means you get to pick. So if that's your exciting one, go for it, Tom.
But
you can have it.
I'm still going to let you have it, Jen, because I know what's best for you here. The one thing that I see now is the launch, the column drag and drop. You can now move column headers around in your views, which is really nice. Instead of having to go out and call up the view and do everything there, just being able to do it on the fly is really cool. So I've got to look and play with that one. Also, the planner task assignment notifications in Microsoft Teams. That's kind of cool in the fact that if somebody assigns something to you in Planner and you spend a lot of days or a lot of your day in Teams, that it's going to pop up and say, hey, you've been assigned a new task within that Teams environment. So I think that's a nice thing. Again, there's other ways you could find that out, but that's good. And I'll go ahead and also throw in the SharePoint sites, adjusting the footer on the site. I think this is something that's been talked about like forever, and it's finally in launch stage. So I think that'll be nice to be able to go out there and start developing some custom headers that can be used in the organization and show up on the site. So I think those three are pretty cool on the SharePoint side.
Cool. Well, I've just got a couple, and then I'll pass it over to Adam. One of the ones, of course, that I love is news. So SharePoint organizational news. Thanks for saving that one for me, Tom.
You're welcome.
You've got your organizational news, which means that you're able to say, hey, this is an organizational site. This is super important. So it will get tagged a certain way and then gets pushed up. That is now fully launched. So you can go in using PowerShell and mark a site as organizational news and then push that information out there. That's exciting. I'm glad that's finally out. And then also your hubs. Your hub limit has now been raised to 2,000.
Officially, yay!
Which is interesting. I've talked to a lot of companies. Some places that really doesn't matter at all. There's other companies that are rather large, or they're, especially in the government space, where they're going in and you've got lots of smaller agencies within larger agencies and different things like that, and they're utilizing the same tenant or different things like that, and they really had concerns with how do I set up the hubs to make sure that we don't have too many and reach any limits, or how do we go for growth. And so I was really excited to see that officially go to 2,000. So that's definitely a good thing there. And then finally, we have some activity in the GovCloud section. So Microsoft Planner is officially launched in both GCC and GCC High. And the Microsoft Teams is available in GCC. And so those are two things where they have been fully launched, and so those are good. I was just in a meeting this week talking about GCC High and Planner there, so exciting to see some of those things coming out there, especially in our space where we're working with a lot of those government customers. And Adam was saying just that we're kind of split between a lot of our customers, or not even our customers, but even with our own internal people, and we're still using Skype for Business. Well, a lot of that has to do with the availability of Teams on government sites and what people can get access to and different things like that. So super excited to see Teams becoming available. So exciting stuff there. So Adam, I'll pass it over to you to see what you find interesting in the launch call. If we saved you anything. Not sure we did.
No, I have two things. They're both going to be kind of dry and technical and boring because, that's me. The first thing, and I'm going to try to do my best to explain this in layman terms, there is this huge update about rewriting email sender of unverified domains and Exchange Online protection. If you dig into the details, basically whenever you get an email from someone, there's two fields that really matter. It's the from field that you see in Outlook, but probably even more importantly, there's a mail from field if you dig into the email headers that really tells you where this email is coming from. It's how you try to get an understanding of where is this sender, or where's the server coming from, who is the sender, stuff like that. Well, Microsoft had a pretty good job and a pretty of locking down the security around that. But if you're in a hybrid environment, there's basically a loophole where if you were sending email from your hybrid server and then ultimately relaying it through Office 365, they did not check the mail from field. So the from could still be whatever, but the actual mail from, the details in the header that would verify what your domain was, they didn't check. And this basically allowed really some people to try to spoof messages, right? I could go through, and if I was a nefarious actor, I could send an email that actually came from Microsoft system from a hybrid server of a customer's tenant that I got access to, and I could make it look like an email is coming from Microsoft and have some bad stuff in there that could potentially get out and cause some problems. What they're really doing now is, even in a hybrid scenario, if you are using their servers, they are going to rewrite that mail from address to be the verified domains that are on that tenant. And what this is really going to do is it's going to let you accurately track back where the email is coming from, and it's going to prevent some of these security spoofing things, which I thought was really cool. It's a huge update, but when you get down to the bare bones of it, that's really what it's doing, which I thought was neat. And coming from someone with an email background, it's nice to see them going through and doing that. The second thing that they're doing, they're basically finally rolling out. This is something I've mentioned, once or twice we're going through, but they're finally rolling out the long-term Azure AD log integration with your SIEM machines, which is Security Information and Event Management machines. So a lot of companies have this, machine or this computer that runs and handles all of the logs related to security events going on for their organization, which is great. Up until now, or in the past, Azure AD logs have kind of been their own thing. If you wanted to ingest those, you could export them and kind of try to do stuff, but now they're doing this long-term automatic retention where you can basically set up the monitoring and reporting that's going on in Azure AD logs to directly deposit this into your SIEMs, which is really cool. It basically means for organizations that embrace this security-focused ideology and software that Azure AD is going to have better integration with it, so it's really nice to see.
That was so exciting, Adam.
Well, I actually lied. There were 2 more that I had. So, Tom, do you have any more before I take the final 2?
You can
All
take
right.
the final shot
So,
there.
Microsoft To Do is now on Mac. So that doesn't impact me because I'm not a Mac user, but I know a lot of Mac users. So Microsoft To Do is now on the Mac. And then the other one that I think is really interesting as well is the multi-geo count reduction. So previously, in order to get the multi-geo capabilities with Office 365, you had to have a minimum of 2,500 seat licenses. Now you can get it with 500 seat licenses. So they definitely reduced that seat count for the multi-geo. So that's another change that they've launched, which I know people who have a need for that requirement are probably very happy that requirement has changed. So there we go for that. And then finally, the last section that we have is the canceled section. Boom, boom, boom. So this is where the sad part comes, and we play the. Did you like my sad trombones? I keep forgetting to bring my noise maker. I have this little thing that makes 32 annoying sounds. It's hidden downstairs in the cabinet, so my children don't find it. But I should bring it so I can play sound effects when we talk about things on the roadmap we like or dislike. But in the canceled section, we can talk about those. So there's really only that big one. Who wants to take it? Hot potato.
Go ahead, guys.
All right, well, Jen's going to take it because nobody spoke up. So we have on here, one of the big ones that we see is item 3250, which is talking about the SharePoint site central asset library. And so when it says canceled, this is one that I don't want people to freak out about. When I first saw it, I had to do a little bit of digging. So let's be honest, I was like, what? This got canceled? But in doing a little bit of digging, talking to another MVP, I found the information that I needed. This one actually did not get canceled. It's actually got rolled into a different feature. And so this is an example when there's something that's a specific line item on the roadmap that gets canceled. It's not really the feature isn't canceled, just the way that they were doing it got canceled. So instead of it being listed as SharePoint Sites, a central asset library where we can go in and put images, it's actually listed on the roadmap now in the rolling out phase as something called Organization Assets, which is a centralized curated view of digital images for reuses and page authoring. So it's allowing for the same concept. We're going to get to the same end results. They're just implementing it a different way. So it's showing up as a different feature ID in the canceled list. So that's kind of really the only major one, I think, on the canceled list. There's some others. There's a performance banner update one for SharePoint where they were going to, if you had a page that was being bad and loading slow, they were going to tell you why your page was being bad and loading slow. That got canceled. And then group resources, and that was something with Yammer and right navigation and doing some different things with their group resources. They've made some cancellations there. Again, cancellations, I think, are more along the lines of rolling into different ways or doing something differently. So none of these cancellations really strike me as anything super major or anything that we need to be worried about or anything like that. So, sweet. Well, I think that's all we have today, guys. Does anyone have any parting words of wisdom?
Enjoy your July 4th, everyone.
Oh, yeah. Next week is July 4th. I expect, so next week I am going to be on vacation, so Tom and Adam are going to do it. I expect a 4th of July show. I expect, the top hats that are, all American Tom, with the white beard. Since you've got the white beard already, we could do this. I expect fireworks and,
You can see
maybe
the excitement in Tom's
God Bless
face.
America or something like that, maybe.
All I'm going to say is, sucks to be you, Adam, because she's your boss. I don't have that same constraint.
Aw. You could
Hey,
do it, though. It would be
I
great.
let you have the news stuff. Don't push it, okay?
All
Thanks,
right.
everyone, for joining us. Jen, enjoy your vacation with your family.
Bye,
good
guys.
one.
You guys have a great week. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Bye, all.
Bye.